Hello, everyone. Welcome to TravMedia Meets. I'm Henry Hemming, Global MD of TravMedia. It's our final webinar of the year, and we're going out with some Christmas fireworks as we welcome 4 of the UK's top travel editors. They're here to help us complete our 2023 cycle of 6 webinars on a festive high as they indulge in a light-hearted reveal, it says here, of some of their favourite travel stories in the year and their best and most noteworthy PR campaigns of 2023. Yep, it's time for Travel Editors' Picks of the Year. If it's good, we may reprise this, and if it's bad, we will drink absinthe cocktails and free associate instead. But I'm sure with this star-spangled lineup of talent, we are in for a lovely surprise. So let's welcome them. We have with us today Caroline Maguire, Travel Editor of The Sun. Hi, Caroline.
Hi.
Francisca Keller, Travel Editor at Large Country and Townhouse Magazine. Hey, Fran.
Hi.
Liz Edwards, Assistant Travel Editor of The Times and Sunday Times.
Hello.
Hello, Liz. And Pat Riddell, Editor, Nat Geo Traveller UK Magazine. Hey, Pat.
Morning, Henry.
Thank you all so much for joining us. So the way that it's going to work today is I'm going to go around the team, ask them in turn some of their favourite picks of inspiring destination features or whatever else. And then we'll get some feedback from everyone else as we go along. And then we'll move on to the PR section. I think today is about nuances, changes in traditional travel writing styles, changes in where the focus is going, what are commissioning editors looking at from their writers, new trends in features and so forth. That are fitting in with the changes in our lifestyle, our economy, and the pressures of the modern world. And I'm sure the word sustainability will come up more than once. Before we get stuck in, if you've got any questions, hit them with us in the Q&A. And as I always say, do at the end of your question, just put in your company name, just in case I don't know who you are. Hopefully I will. We're not going to break up the conversation with kind of screen sharing, because I think that will just get too difficult, but we will share links with anyone who requests post-event. And do share your thoughts on social. We are at TravMedia_UK, and if you can include the panelists, and we love seeing your posts and blogs, especially do some social if you get a shout out. So let's turn to the media picks, and we're going to start with Caroline. So Caroline has launched The Sun's online travel section in 2017, built a digital team of 5 full-time writers whose combined work attracts now a mere 17 million hits a month. The output of The Sun is absolutely prodigious now. So Caroline, we're delighted to have you with us. Tell us a bit about some articles that have caught your eye this year.
I mean, the first one I'm starting with isn't particularly the article as such. It was more the topic of it. So it was towards the end of the year. It was Morgan Porth in Cornwall, and it rarely happens, I find, that a travel kind of story gets to straddle as well sort of national news, local news, and showbiz. And it was about how this small, relatively unknown, I think it's fair to say, seaside town in Cornwall was becoming Hollywood on Sea, which is in itself an amazingly catchy headline. Yeah, it was just, so I think it's because I think, unless I'm wrong, it started off with a story from the Bazaar column about how, what's his name, Merman, Jason Momoa was buying a place there. And then I think it transpired that lots of other people were there, and then people were complaining about it. But then there were some travel articles about what it was like. And it's just one of those ones that got really to mushroom. And I found it a really good example of what can happen now with online, and how much you can capitalize on things in different ways that you probably wouldn't have been able to in a traditional print format. So you can go, oh, well, that's great. Let's investigate that area. Let's write about it for people who don't know about it. Then local news will pick it up and say, well, this is what it's like for people who live there. And it just kind of, it's a really good example to me of how online is changing the way that travel write about various topics, I would say. Plus it brings in the impact of over tourism in Cornwall and how that's affecting people. Yeah.
Yeah, but the big travel feature comes quite late in that process. It's a really interesting trend. And that was Tom Mulvihill in The Telegraph.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, to be fair, like a few places did exactly the same thing, which is why that's also really good. You know, you've got different readers who are reading a slightly different version of that. So the Telegraph one was talking about something very different to what we spoke about in The Sun, which in turn would have been very different to how the Times would have written it.
Yeah, very good. Fascinating story. And a really, for me, a tantalising story about casting yourself away on a desert island. This is what I want to do every day.
I love this one. This is not a new company. It's been around for, I think, about 10 years, but it has got barely any news coverage, certainly in the last few years. I paid to be shipwrecked on a desert island. I mean, the amount of people who would see that and either think, God, that's hell on earth, or wow, where can I? Our news editor at The Sun emailed afterwards and said, how do I get to do this? Which I'm not sure what that says about our workplace, but that's where she immediately decided to go. This is, again, it's a really good example of how we can make travel stories very sort of creative and interesting, but for a tabloid audience. Now, this was in the Mirror. It's a first person one. Obviously, online has made a lot of things first person in the last few years. There's been a proliferation of those kind of first person stories, but this is a really good version of it, which is that person who did that, and then what it was like for them while they were on there. And for me, Discover has made a massive difference to how we report on things. And this is a really good example. I would have used my own ones, but you told me not to. So, but yeah, a really good example of how tabloid newspapers can do online articles about really interesting things that we probably wouldn't have done. I think I probably wouldn't have done in 2018, 2019. Discover has really changed the way that we look at stories and whether or not we consider them to be of potential to us. And that's probably across the board. And yeah, making that known to the PRs who are watching this. And I almost would say that no suggestion is a bad idea for me at the moment. I'm pretty much willing to try anything. So yeah,
real evidence of how we can do everything again. And that was, the company is called Castaway, like Doc Castaway.
Yeah, and it's not new, but it's definitely new to me. And it hasn't had an awful lot. I could only find in the last 2 years 2 articles sort of online. So it's, you know, relatively small company, but so fascinating that people actually get paid to do that.
Yeah. And you had a final pick on Bulgaria.
Yeah, I do love this. I'm cheating a little bit. It's 2022, but it stuck so much in my mind that I felt like it deserved a mention. The Mail went to one of Europe's cheapest all-inclusive hotels in Sunny Beach. And it was written by a writer who I can't imagine has ever set foot in Sunny Beach before this, and certainly not set foot in that kind of all-inclusive. Obviously, we would have written it slightly differently in The Sun, but I like the way that they did it. I like the concept of it, of going and writing a full kind of proper feature about what it was like for people who hadn't been somewhere like that. He managed to get the poet Dylan Thomas name checked in it somehow. It was just quite amazing. It was a great read, and it stuck with me. I thought it was really, really clever.
Yeah, terrific. And he showed that you can do it at 40 quid a night, all inclusive.
And he had a good time.
Yeah, he did have a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts on any of those picks from the team, the rest of the team? Some lovely stories. Fran.
I was really intrigued by the Castaway story, and it felt a bit like a sort of potential tales of the unexpected. You can imagine the fisherman who left him there, something happening and then never coming back. I don't know. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but it was an interesting one to read. I hadn't come across it either. So yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? Because it's such a good idea that you would have thought that we would have all have known about it a lot more. But yeah, it was great.
Wonder what disclaimers they have to sign before they go and do it.
Yeah. They do it quickly.
The same thing. I just think it's a really interesting idea, and I've not heard of it before, basically. And yeah, just sort of strange and frightening and exciting and adventurous. Yeah, really nice idea.
Amazing. You do get a spear gun, apparently.
Is that a good thing? I don't know.
How about matches? That's what I was worried about. Starting a fire.
Amazing. Be Tom Hanks for a week. Well, Fran, let's move on to you and your choices. So you're joining us today in your capacity as travel editor at large of the wonderful Country and Townhouse magazine. Lucy and her team doing an amazing job there. People will have got to know you in your previous roles, travel editor of Tatler, a digital travel editor of the Telegraph, and you're a prolific freelancer known as an expert on luxury and sustainable travel, writing for The Times, Nat Geo, FT and others. Delightful to have you with us today. What's caught your eye in 2023, Fran?
Yeah, thanks, Henry. This first piece is very much at the high end of the scale. It was a piece that ran in Travel and Leisure magazine in January by Stanley Stewart, who's a gorgeous writer who I love. This was about a cruise to Antarctica, which cost 27,000 per person, all inclusive, slightly different from Caroline's Bulgaria story. But what I really loved about this story is that it's about a cruise. I'm not a fan of cruises. I would not usually read about cruises, but this somehow grabbed me because I think he's such a beautiful writer. It has a really strong opening. It has humor in it. It brings the whole sort of landscape of Antarctica to life, the whole experience of going there by ship. He also brings in Shackleton, which is a story I absolutely love. So he has this fantastic mix of kind of bringing the place to life, also bringing in history. And then he also touches on things like sustainability, which obviously is a massive issue if you're going to a place like Antarctica, especially on a cruise ship. So he talks about that and how this cruise line is trying to tackle that. But I think it's a really lovely piece of travel writing. He did actually win an award for it as well. I forget where, but it's just a really lovely, interesting piece, which kind of draws you in and makes you want to go and have that experience if you have a spare 27,000 in your back pocket.
And the weave-in of Shackleton is brilliantly done.
Really nicely done, yeah. It's really subtle, really interesting. You learn a lot from it, and it just makes it really exciting.
Brilliant. And he takes incredible photos, Stanley.
He does. Such nice photos, yeah. Yeah.
And then you watched Matthew Paris's exploits getting across Africa in a train.
Yeah, Matthew Paris is another wonderful writer, especially on Africa, obviously. And this is at the other end of the scale. So he paid 105. This is a piece that ran in the Times just a couple of weeks ago, actually. He paid £105 to travel for days and days and days by sleeper train from Zambia to Tanzania. And it's this really lovely sort of rambling story. Not a huge amount happens, but it just really brings to life again that experience of being on this train, all the sort of local colour, the people that he meets, the things he sees. It really made me want to travel like that again. It's the kind of travel I used to do in my 20s and don't anymore really, but long to again. And I think any piece that makes you long for adventure and long to have that experience is really powerful. And the fact that it was, you know, incredibly affordable on this essentially sort of local train, you know, I thought was really interesting as well. And again, he just writes really beautifully.
I have to say, just to jump in on that one, it was obviously a real gift when Matthew came to us with it. I mean, he's great. He just very casually dropped me a line, just, you know, I'm just about to go off on this train, you know, and I'm like, would you like to write about that? And I think the fact that he was doing it anyway off his own bat, and it was something that he wanted to do, that sort of really came through in the writing as well, and sort of, I don't know, just gave it an extra bit of authenticity. I think that that just helped it shine, really.
Yeah. Yes, and it was quite an eye-opener to hear that the price of the 1,100-mile journey was the same as he would pay for a return from Matlock, Derbyshire to London.
Yes, that says it all.
It really does.
Yeah.
Fran, while we've got you, actually, what is your focus going to be with Country and Townhouse? Are you commissioning, or are you just
purely... Thanks, Henry, because I've not quite started yet, so I feel a little bit of a fraud being on this panel without a title, as lovely as it is. But I won't be commissioning as such. I'm going to be writing a column every issue, and I'm helping with sort of general editorial strategy. So trying to sort of focus what they're going to be doing. Obviously, the magazine is very big on sustainability. It's the only glossy B Corp magazine in the world, I believe. Yeah. So they're very, very strong on that. So there'll be a lot about sustainability and conservation. And so rather than me physically commissioning, I'll be kind of helping steer the direction of the editorial.
Terrific to hear. Great. So Liz, should we hear your pick? So Liz, assistant travel editor at Times Sunday Times. you've been there for 4 years, focusing on editing and commission, but you tell me every year, next year I'm going to do more traveling. And I thought the most obvious thing about your bio is there's a hotel in Derbyshire that has a cocktail named after you, because your review took them to task for serving disappointingly weak drinks.
Yes, that was the career high, getting the cocktail named after me. But I have made it. It is extremely strong. So they did the job.
Sounds like the first season of the trip, but anyway.
It is a bit.
Over to you.
Thanks, Henry. So I did totally cheat, I'm afraid, and I picked a couple of Times and Sunday Times pieces. Caroline, your integrity is much more intact than mine, I'm afraid. But this one really stuck in my mind. My first pick was Chris Haslam's piece about the Morocco earthquake that he. I think we ran it maybe 4 or 5 days after the earthquake. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to highlight it, obviously it was a big story for tourism this year, you know, one of the biggest. But also it was a sort of really, I felt like a really good reminder of the fact that you know, a lot of I don't know, even within the newsroom, possibly, you know, the world at large will regard the travel section as the sort of fluffy aren't holidays nice section, which obviously has a place because they are very nice and, you know, have their place. But it was a reminder that of something that I think we certainly saw during the pandemic, that you know, travel can perform a news function as well. And we were lucky. Not quite, you know, certainly luckier than Chris was, that he was on the spot. He'd taken the train to Marrakesh to be there ahead of Pure, and so he was on the spot when it happened. And obviously then his sort of news hound instinct kicked in, and he was out reporting, you know, not just on Marrakesh, but out in the countryside as well. And I think, as I say, you know, it's obviously a big story for everyone because it's such a significant destination for UK tourists. So it sort of felt pretty vital that we covered it straight away. But yeah, I think he just did a really nice job of reporting on the news side of it, but also thinking about both holiday makers and the local people, and just, you know, the impact sort of in the immediate term and sort of longer term for them. And yeah, it wasn't, interestingly, it wasn't one of our best performers in terms of UVs, which is obviously one of our metrics, but in terms of dwell time, you know, so an indication of people actually stopping to read it, but the quality part of the equation, it did really well. So that's one of those picks. My other suggestion certainly is at the more sort of frivolous end of the spectrum. It was Jonathan Dean's piece about the Uvet Landscape Hotel in Norway, which featured in one or two of the episodes of the final series of Succession. I don't want to give any spoilers, but Jonathan's a big Succession fan. He's sort of interviewed lots of the stars and the makers behind it. So he seemed like, you know, a great writer to send off on this. And I think what was sort of interesting about it from that point of view then was that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't what you would necessarily call a classic travel piece, because he's not just a travel writer. You know, travel is one of, you know, the many strings to his bow. So I think that sort of gave it a bit of a freshness and a slightly different approach. So I think it sort of, a lot of it meant that it sort of broke out of the formula, I suppose, of class, of, you know, a lot of travel writing that you get. So that's sort of why it stuck out. And also it gave us the opportunity. So Susan Darcy, who many of you will know is our sort of spa luxury sort of hotel expert, she interviewed Mark Mylord, who's one of the Succession directors, in a piece that's sort of a companion piece that sat with it. So we put together this sort of whole package that ticked off the travel and the celebrity and you know, and the insight, just all in one go. So yeah, that was that one. And then also I the one story I did pick that wasn't from the Times was from 2022, so I've just done it all wrong, I'm afraid. But it was just a special mention for Jamie Lafferty's piece in the FT about his trip to Guyana and his near-death experience. it was just an astonishing story anyway. I mean, you know, the story itself, it was all tied into the BA route launch, so there's a topicality. But so he managed to sort of tick that off, get in lots of sort of colour and adventurousness. And then just have this incredible story about them all nearly dying, but luckily not. All in his.
For anyone who doesn't know the story, would you just give us the précis version, because it is quite extraordinary?
Yeah, so they were sort of trekking off across through the jungle. I think it's like on a 4 or 5 day hike with guides, and Guyana's, you know, it's known for its sort of incredible waterfalls, and I think they'd already seen one anyway. And then so it's towards the end of the trip, and they just had to cross this river, and I think the fisherman who's supposed to come and collect them didn't turn up. So there's your cautionary tale applied to the castaway story. Didn't turn, but there was a boat on the beach that their guides were like, well, we'll just take that one across. And then there's this sort of freak tornado appeared from nowhere, and I think tipped the boat. They all had to sort of jump out of the boat, but they were, I think he said, like 50 meters from the edge of the waterfall.
Yeah,
they were so close to tragedy. Yeah. I mean, the astonishing thing as well, I think he was with a few influencers, and they were still filming the whole thing. They, you know, like phone out of the water. Yeah. Like, it was, yes, it's the kind of thing that you wouldn't really want to happen to you if you're organising a press trip or if you were on it. But yeah, they were obviously the right people to deal with it at the right time.
There is one extraordinary photo taken as they're fighting for their lives. So worth going and seeing online, everyone. Jamie was a winner at the TravMedia Awards, but you don't have to have a near-death experience to win.
Yeah.
Everyone else, any commentary on those fascinating stories?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about Chris's piece about Morocco. I remember it coming out. I think Chris is such a good writer, and he does have that real sort of nose for a news story. So I thought it was a really, really good piece, and it's really nice how it has practical advice in there as well. So at the time it was about donating to the Intrepid Foundation and about not cancelling your holidays, which I thought was a really important message. So yeah. I thought it was a really great piece from Chris.
Because tourism PRs just never know what to do in the immediate aftermath of a crisis. You know, is it time to remind people that we're here, or do we just kind of disappear for a while? But I think Chris's treatment and Liz's decision was really sensitively handled.
It was, yes, as Fan says, yes, it was really good, because readers did just want to know. We were hearing from so many people about, you know, should they cancel or not, and actually, so it was, you know, it was very satisfying to just be able to say, go ahead, you know, have your holiday, but also it'll help the people affected.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you very much for those, Liz. That's wonderful. So to finish the quartet of media, our guest media stories, we have Pat Riddell, editor of Nat Geo Traveller, over 20 years experience in travel publishing. I think I met you on the day you joined, Pat,
yes.
An industry event. And you've been editor of award-winning Nat Geo Traveller since 2010. Indeed, you won Travel Publication of the Year at our awards last year. So tell us about your very interesting picks.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah, well, I try to avoid cheating by not picking our own pieces, but found a couple of pieces by writers we use regularly. So both in the FT and both, I guess, the sort of pieces we commission. So it's kind of not cheating, but getting around the rule. First one was published back in March. Manisha Rajesh took the train from London to Istanbul, retracing the original Orient Express. So I think a sort of few things combined there. It's 140 years anniversary of the original Orient Express sort of kicking off. As she mentions in the piece, there's quite a lot of new launches next year for new sleeper trains across Europe. There's kind of a revival, I think, of some of those routes, some for obvious reasons and some for, I think, perhaps more practical. And I think also, you know, the Accor's relaunching the Orient Express brand with the train next year, slightly confusingly not linked to Belmon's Orient Express train. So there's kind of a lot bound up in this, but she's done quite a few train pieces for us. Obviously, she's done a couple of books, and she's got a really kind of, I think, masterful way of describing train journeys, because it's very easy on those sorts of train or kind of those journey pieces to sort of talk, I suppose to talk about the stops and not what happened in between. So she's great at sort of talking to people and bringing in the characters and describing the scenery and what the trains are like. And this obviously is not a straightforward A to B kind of journey. There's several changes. There's a few timetable mishaps. So it's a kind, I suppose it's a nice story retracing a route in a modern day capacity with several good hooks.
Yeah. She's had 3 books published on train travel, and it's beautifully written. I just wonder, with the rest of the team, we've got a big focus on trains next year. Maybe rail travel has never been more popular. Caroline, is rail travel going to be big with your team in 2024?
Honestly, a year and a half ago, I would have said absolutely not. But like I was saying earlier, the magic of Google Discover loves trains. So now we do too. And that's why I sort of was, yeah, exactly. Trains, it's clearly is what people are interested in. And even the Sun, which is not traditionally what you would have expected to be, particularly apart from maybe Eurostar. Yeah, we would now be interested in it.
And Fran, are you a train traveller, or will you delegate that to others?
Yes, I love train travel. I think it's a wonderful way to get from A to B and making, the journey part of the experience. The problem is it's just often quite expensive and obviously takes longer. So it's kind of convincing readers that it's worthwhile taking the train instead of flying.
Yeah. Our viewers, you should think about reaching out to Fran post this, I would think. And Liz, rail featuring big with you, obviously, we've heard.
Huge, yeah. I mean, we've had quite a bit this year already. It really just seems to capture everyone's imagination. You've got the romance of travel, you've got a sustainability element. There's so much more to it. I mean, yeah, Fran's right. The cost is still prohibitive, but it's not for some people. Not necessarily our readers quite so much. But yeah, it's certainly something that they love reading about, and we'll definitely be doing more.
Terrific. Cool. So just a reminder to our audience, do hit us with questions. I've got one already. I'm just saving that for a little bit later, but do come back with questions for our panel, maybe about their particular pages and their areas of focus. But let's move on to some PR picks. And I'm just praying our panel are going to be generous to the PRs out there. Tell us what their stories of the year have been. And let's start again with Caroline. Yeah, Caroline, you've been attracted to somebody's kind of bulletin that you get.
Gone really left field with this one. I do appreciate that. But I think it deserves a shout out because every single month, I mean, I'm sure lots of people will know who he is, but Mark Hibbert, he sends a monthly press release. He largely covers, UK destinations that perhaps would be considered less glamorous, places like Hull, but he has a news in 30 seconds part of his press release, which is literally 2 lines about pretty much all of the places that he covers. He's picked something out. He used to be a news journalist, and there is nearly always something within that press release that I will pick out and do a standalone story on. It really cuts through the noise of the I mean, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I have 560,000 unread emails in my inbox, and that gives you an idea of quite how many I get. So if someone sends that and I know there's going to be something good in it and it's super quick and I don't have to read a load of sort of fluff around the outside, then it's an instant win for me, basically.
Yeah,
so he deserves a mention.
And beautifully concise and beautifully written. And I'm guessing you're going to say you wish more PRs would, as well as hitting you with 560,000 emails, just would do a potted summary of the best press trip hooks and news hooks from their clients.
that is all I would want from anyone, if I'm totally honest with you, like 2 lines. And if I want more, I will come and ask for more. But I don't, I'm reading so many words on a daily basis that if I can cut that down to the absolute crucial, what the headline is, then I'm so happy for it.
Yeah. So New Year's resolution PR, potted summaries and angles and hooks. Terrific. What does the rest of the team think about that? Do you wish you got more like that? Liz, over to you.
Yes, couldn't agree more. It's a challenge, just, making it, never get through the inbox. So anything that really stands out and just makes life fractionally easier is always going to be a win. I mean, it's sort of, I know it's really hard to convey the volume that we're all dealing with, but even I find if you had like 30 seconds to spend on every email each day, that would still take up about 7 or 8 hours, and then you haven't got any of your job done. So anything that can make it punchier and easier is very welcome.
Yeah. Pat, what floats your boat when it comes to the email pitch?
Yeah, I think the same really. I get probably similar amount of emails, and the ones that, I mean, certainly, I do a lot of chats on pitching for freelancers, where I think the same applies. The subject line needs to kind of grab your attention, and then as you glance into it, if it's, I mean, you can include the details further down, but if at the top you've got bullet points of what's there, and obviously if it's tailored towards the publication, then you've got a very, very quick idea of what's in the email and what you may or may not do with it.
Terrific. Fran, over to you. You've got 2 very interesting PR ideas. One, a great launch strategy, and one where you just feel we've been slightly misled. So over to you.
Yeah, so the first one was the launch of Hotel Passalacqua, which is this beautiful luxury hotel in Italy on Lake Como. And the launch was quite interesting because instead of sort of doing the usual press trips and so on, they invited a bunch of influencers for a house party, which had a huge amount of success. So, for example, their Instagram, the Instagram of this hotel rose from 2.5 thousand to 16.6 thousand a day during this house party. And then there was coverage in FT How to Spend It, House and Garden, Architectural Digest, Vogue, Condé Nast Traveler, Vanity Fair. Basically everyone covered it. Excuse me. So that was incredibly successful, and it then won various awards within a few months of opening. So that was a very successful campaign from Prone International. So that was the first story. Should I just launch straight into the second one?
Well, just a quick question on that. Well done, Perone. Obviously a brilliant campaign. What was the kind of main message that caught journalists' eyes about this wonderful Lake Como palace?
I think probably it's an interesting question, actually. It's family owned, which I think is always a nice angle. So it's not owned by one of these sort of huge brands. It's very luxurious, obviously, which is always nice to write about, I suppose, and those, especially for those glossy mags. And it was a very sort of new offering on Lake Como, and just incredibly glamorous, I suppose, which was helped by this launch party.
Yeah, terrific. And followed up with an influencer campaign.
Yeah.
And do you think journalists are increasingly becoming more influential as influencers? Are they developing those talents, do you feel?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, yes, to a certain extent, we all have to do a bit of that. The social media treadmill is a constant worry. But of course, there's lots of other people now in that field in terms of influencers and bloggers and vloggers and TikTokers and so on. Snapping our heels. So it's an interesting time for journalists, put it that way.
Yeah. Before we come to your second one, Liz, do you increasingly look for the whole package from your freelancers in terms of writing plus social footprint, or is it just about the words?
Well, yeah, I mean, we wouldn't like rule anyone out if they didn't have a sort of social media presence. But I suppose in terms of, just self-publicity, the more we've seen of people online, the more we'll have an idea of what they're interested in. Or, occasionally we might have seen writers, say, posting on sort of Twitter or Instagram about where they are, or thoughts about this particular story that might spin off into a piece. Yeah, it certainly plays a role. And also now that we're putting a bit more emphasis on video, whether it's for social or YouTube or running on the Times website, if someone is willing and able to do some video content for us, then that helps. But we certainly we wouldn't not use someone because they don't do that stuff. So I suppose, yeah, so words, the ideas and words are still very much the core of what we're doing, and that's the most key thing. But those other factors are sort of, I suppose they're just gaining weight, basically.
Anyway, yeah. Pat and Caroline, any thoughts on that before we get back to Fran?
We tend to commission photographers for most of our bigger pieces,
Right.
so don't depend on writers doing that. But I think, like Liz says, if you're promoting stuff on social, whether it's sharing the links, photos on Twitter or Instagram, it helps with online, if not newsstand sales.
Yeah, but you're looking for journalists who are photojournalists who can cover their trip from that angle.
Well, they're the mainly writers, who can write. Like I say, we commission photographers separately. There are a handful that can do both particularly well. If there were more doing both well, that'd be great, because it saves on the logistics of getting two people out to a destination, if someone's there already. But
yeah.
And
Caroline, do you have a thought?
Yeah. I think I'm less concerned about if someone, obviously it's a bonus if someone can do video or great pictures, but I think that for me, what's super important, obviously, given the fact that I do online, is that people understand what works for an online story word-wise and headline-wise, and if they can make that work. I agree, for what we do, words are still completely the most important thing. So yeah.
Terrific. That's very reassuring to hear. So Fran, back to you for your take on the Virgin fuel story.
Yeah, this is a huge story, so I'll try and keep it brief, but this was about the launch of Virgin's I think was it flight 100 or flight 101, I can't remember, which took off last week from London to New York, which is the first flight run completely on sustainable aviation fuel. And there's a huge hoo-ha about this and loads of coverage, and everyone's saying this is kind of the future of aviation. The Department for Transport called it the start of making guilt-free flying a reality, and basically saying this was kind of the future of us being able to fly without a carbon footprint, or with much smaller carbon footprints. And then various people waded in, such as Greenpeace, saying, actually, hang on, that's not actually really realistic, is it? And once you kind of dig into it, I think it was sort of reported quite breathlessly as the sort of future of aviation. And then a few other publications came in and said, hang on, no, actually, it's not as simple as that. It depends where, well, I mean, lots of issues. First of all, where it's sourced from. So Virgin, for example, last year bought 600,000 litres of used cooking oil from China and Indonesia. And it's sort of the question of where that's actually come from, whether that's land that ought to be used for agriculture to feed local populations, or whether it's driving deforestation in those countries. For this particular flight, it was 100% European used oil. But then once you look at the sort of future of this, and if it's scaled, if we were to run all of our domestic flights within the UK on sustainable aviation fuel, we would have to give over half of all agricultural land within our country to produce crops which would create that oil. So it's not hugely realistic to think that that's kind of the future of green flying. And actually, of course, we need to be investing in alternative things such as electric and hydrogen, and flying less is the main thing, really.
Yeah, good, great, very good to hear. Quite a different feeling to those two planes taking off simultaneously when COVID restrictions became relaxed. That gave you a real feel-good feeling, but not this time. Yeah, thank you, Fran. That's terrific. Liz, tell us about your PR pick of 2023.
Sure. So this was not a story that was quite on the scale of the Virgin flight, but it was tied in not only to a new airline route, but and a whole new airport, which doesn't come up so often. But it had been so under the radar that I didn't even know about this new airport in Romania until Caroline Calvert was telling me about it. Her client Regent, obviously they're experts, particularly in Eastern Europe. So obviously they were sort of all over it. And so it was quite simple, a new airport is opening up a new part of the country. They'd put together an itinerary around that. And she came to us with it. It was really not, I mean, Romania, it's one of those countries that well, certainly coming out of the pandemic, we weren't really sort of writing about very much because everyone was just going back to their old favourites. But now that we're sort of beyond that point, people are looking for new, particularly cheaper destinations. It seems to be really sort of resonating with our readers. We've had a few stories. I think it didn't hurt, obviously, that King Charles has a place out there, so that's had a bit of coverage that way. But yeah, so Caroline came to me, and I think because she knew that it would be right for our readers, and it was a tailored pitch to me. So it sort of that. I think that sort of helped with it. And then we sent Felicity Cloak, who's obviously a fabulous writer, particularly on food. There's a strong foodie element to the itinerary. So yeah, it just all sort of fell into place really nicely. We know that Regent had a really good response to it. We definitely saw a good response in terms of our sort of comments and engagement online. So yeah, not a sort of hugely headline grabbing story, but I just thought a really nice tale of how it worked well for us, for everyone.
What were the tick boxes for the Times and Sunday Times with the pitch?
Sorry, what's that?
What were the tick boxes? I mean, one was maybe Eastern Europe, another food.
Yeah. Food is always a winner, and culture. Scenery, there was sort of scenery, there was outdoorsiness. So I mean, they're all things that we don't necessarily expect to combine in one story, but when you can sort of scoop up a few at once, then all the better. Especially and people love reading about new places, even if they may not get there themselves. You've got a bit of that sort of dinner party cachet from knowing the latest openings. So yeah, it all pieced together very nicely.
Delightful read. I think the first foodies in were the hairy bikers, Liz, but anyway.
Oh yeah, probably. They get everywhere, don't they?
They do. God bless them. And we'll finally go to Pat's PR pick, which I think may generate a little bit of debate amongst the team. Very interesting story from London in 2023, Pat.
Yeah, it's not one particular campaign necessarily, but I think the opening of the Peninsula and the OWO raffles or September, October time kind of caused this London luxury hotels boom story, which was picked up across, I think most of the nationals had it, several magazines, and whether they were focused on one hotel or the other, those two opening around the same time kind of caused this. But obviously you've got Savoy, Dorchester, recent refurbs. There's Six Senses, Mandarin Oriental, Rosewood, Park Hyatt, all in the pipeline in the next year or so, I think. So it's obviously sky high prices for most people, but it's a compelling story, I think, post pandemic. And I think even I mean certainly I think some of these brands have been looking for a London property for decades, and it's probably been 10 years or more since there's been this many luxury brands opening in London, and reflects something about the capital. You can draw your own conclusions what they are, but it's a story that I think is going to carry on into next year.
Yeah. And the media's take on it was kind of a lot of messaging around 7 stars and a lot of messaging around £1,000 a night, Pat.
Yeah, I think the starting price for Peninsula and the War Office are both 4 figures upwards, and the top suites are probably 5 or 6 figures, depending on where you stay and how long. So it's a different part of London, and is obviously a million miles away from the cost of living crisis.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, as a positive, it is. I mean, London has had undercapacity in 4 and 5 star for years, and it's very good to see these properties coming through, and it's great for the UK and London's image abroad. At the same time, we've got a question from Laura Marfill Williams, currently working with clients in the Caribbean and East Anglia for maximum contrast status. She says, is it now editorial policy to make mention of pricing in a way that puts cost of living issues at the fore, or is there still a place for blowout aspirational trips? And I think we've kind of heard from our panel that there's room for both. Liz, is cost of living messaging still really important in your stories?
I think so, because there's just a general sense on the desk and among our readers that to sort of cover these sorts of places without at least sort of acknowledging it would be quite insensitive.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously elsewhere on the paper, we've got the Lux section, which sort of has, its stall is set out very differently, so they kind of got different considerations. But certainly for us, lots of our readers, maybe not lots, plenty of our readers, might consider those kinds of prices, but we also have to cater for those for whom those prices might seem a bit obscene, frankly.
Totally. And Caroline, how do you approach cost of living? And I know you're not going to say we just send everyone to Bulgaria.
No, it's hugely important for my readers. Obviously, that's it's made a massive difference to what we are writing about this year. Eastern Europe has factored in so much more than it ever did before, I think, as well. Lesser known UK destinations for the exact same reason. You're going to get more for your money. But saying that, some readers are remarkably resilient with how much money they spend on their holidays, and you would be very surprised. The places like the Maldives and Dubai are, okay, it's predictable places, but like they are hugely of interest. They are still going to be saving up, even if they are not spending money elsewhere. They will be saving up for that.
Yeah. So you cover both sides of the spectrum, from sensibly priced trips to the big splurge, anniversaries, family get-togethers. Yeah,
it would be more bucket list stuff. It's not going to be like your every year holiday, and they are very predictable destinations. But the cost of a Florida holiday now at Disney World is astronomical, and I look at the prices and think, how on earth do most people afford that? But they do. They save up. They save up for 2 years, and they will go on that holiday, and they will make sure that they can do it. So yeah, there's a lot of people who need to be more clever about where they're going, so they can have exactly the same experience they used to for less money. Or there's people who will just kind of save in every other aspect of their lives purely so that they can still do the things that they've had their eye on.
Yeah.
I think we found as well that particularly with the London hotel story is that it's not just about staying in those hotels. There are lots of people who will be coming to London for a weekend who might want to go and have an afternoon tea or a cocktail somewhere a bit fancy, so they can still experience the places without taking out a new mortgage.
Very good. Well, a couple more questions on from our audience. Alicia Collins at Tourism New Zealand, who guested on a recent webinar. Is there trend fatigue, team, within the travel media space? Is there skepticism over trends which are actually longer term patterns, she says? Is there an opportunity to approach from a different angle and show how a destination or experience just stands the test of times, standing out from its competitors, rather than fitting in with trends and hooks? Has the traveling public got a little bit tired of trends? And who should I go to on this? Fran, would you like to start us off on that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it is that kind of annual sort of time where everything rolls around, and it's everything's just for the trends pieces again. I think the problem is people always want to write about something new because there's a story there. It's an easy hook if it's new, or if there's a trend that you can kind of hook something to. So I think, I don't think that's ever going to go away, but I think there's also space definitely for writing about places that aren't necessarily new or have a huge newsy hook, which do stand the test of time. So I think it's kind of finding that balance. I do sometimes wonder if that kind of obsession with newsy hooks and trends is very much kind of from an internal point of view. If you're a newspaper or magazine, for example, I wonder how much readers care so much about exclusives and so on. But I don't know, perhaps there's some kind of interesting data insight that, for example, Caroline has on how much people click on stuff that is new and exclusive, or has a sort of trend.
You have to answer that.
It's a bit of both, I think. Yeah, you're right though. I'm absolutely convinced that when you read a newspaper or you go on online, the only people who notice the exclusive tag are the journalists, and same for the bylines mainly as well. But I think definitely stuff that's going to be big next year, or stuff that that you should swap for something next year that will be big, is definitely of interest to our readers. But so is, and this is going to be a mega cliche, so is Benidorm. Because they do want to read about Benidorm, they love it, and they will read about why it's still great, etc., etc. So I think it's a really interesting topic, and there's lots of well-loved destinations that if you can sort of tap into a nostalgia feel, something like that, and people would definitely still click on it because they love it and they want to remember the holiday that they went on by reading it.
Terrific. Pat, any thoughts on trends? To what extent do trends influence your cover stories and so forth?
I suppose it's kind of 50-50, I suppose, really. If there's new routes, if there's tour operator interest, new hotels and tours opening and stuff, then that we'll steer things that way sometimes. Most of the time, we'll plan the destinations a year ahead, and we'll say, it's time to do Chile again, it's time to do South Africa, it's Romania's kind of time for feature, and then we'll find pitches, or we'll find stories that kind of make those things happen. So it might be that we haven't covered a certain part of the country before, and we'll send a writer there and let them find a story, which will be the local characters, will be the food, will be the culture, will be they'll do the things that we cover generally, and maybe there'll be a new hook for something, but that won't be often won't be the main focus of the feature. And I think what was I going to say? No, it's gone. But yeah, I think it works both ways. It's nice when there's new stuff, but I think the focus for us is where we cover. I was going to say, every year we'll have London, New York, Berlin, the regular destinations, and they'll just be, if not a new way, a different way of covering them.
Terrific, Pat. And we've got 3 more questions to get answered in the last 6 minutes, but just want to do full justice to your picks on this London new deluxe hotels story. The other 2 stories you picked were Zoe Wood in The Guardian writing about it, the rise of London's 1,000 plus a night super luxe hotels, and as Pat says, there's plenty more coming on stream. And then finally, Tom Robbins in the FT, who stayed at the OWO in Whitehall. And he starts on Tuesday last month. I woke up in Winston Churchill's office. Field is a bit special. Maybe I'll fork out £1,000 just to be able to say that. Terrific. Thank you for that, Pat. Okay, so here's one, maybe Caroline. We've got Laura and Olivia from Blackpool Pleasure Beach. They're saying, how do you prefer to be pitched to for UK specific trips? What do you look for? So what would be a good pitch from Blackpool?
Yeah, so we're still very sorry, I'm aware there's 6 minutes here, so I'm going to be very quick. We are still very separate in terms of trips. So Lisa, who the entire travel world knows, she is very much in charge of trips, so always pitch to her, and it will make it work for online. So the story goes in the paper, and we will rewrite the headline so that it works for online. And if it's something that we think is particularly of interest, we might then set up a press trip with the idea of doing it for online kind of headlines, and then it will go in the paper. But she's always the person to go with on that.
Yeah. And then to kind of double down on this one, we've got Natasha Osorio from Expedia, Media Relations Manager, says, I'm going to pitch this to the rest of the team. What are your main considerations when accepting or rejecting a press trip invite? Liz, would you like to start with that one?
Sure. I mean, we've been sort of steering away from accepting group trip invitations lately. The usual reasons, wanting a different story to other people. If we can get out there before a group trip and on an individual, all the better. But that's not to say that we rule them out altogether. Sometimes they'll work nicely. It will depend on the mix of other publications going, whether we can run the story first. Obviously we still want to look at visuals and pictures and see what kind of materials might be available to us, and how the story might work.
So exclusivity, materials, and good ideas. And Fran, what do you look for with press trip invites that come your way?
I look for trips that are tailored to me and the kind of things I write about and I'm interested in, and the publications I work for. So for example, for Country and Townhouse, if I'm getting invited to some huge glitzy resort in Dubai, or a private jet trip, or anything that doesn't kind of tick those B Corp boxes, that's just going to get ignored. And similarly, just the kind of things that I personally write about, generally luxury and sustainability. If it's sort of mass market trip with a focus that isn't that, I'm not that likely to respond.
Okay, that's really helpful. And Pat, trips and Nat Geo.
We don't tend to do a lot of group press trips, largely because we just want the writer to go and find their own story and have the time to do that. So 2,500 word feature or cover story, they're going to need 4 or 5 days longer sometimes to dig down and do their own thing. But shorter pieces, winter sports or safari, or trip where you would normally be with other people, they do work. So it varies. And then having said all of that, it does depend what destinations we've got in mind. So when the two combine, it does work.
Terrific. And our final question from the very brilliant Kaya Cheshire, PR manager at British Airways Holidays, who wishes firstly to empathise with those of you who have 543,000 emails in your inbox. She says, do you still love attending a group event with a news hook for the media? She says this winter has been filled with media events, and she just wonders whether that still works, or do you prefer those cozy individual one-to-one briefings? Liz, let's go around the group and then finish. Liz, your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, on a personal level, I enjoy an event, and I think it can be a really useful way of meeting lots of people and having lots of conversations all in one go. The practicalities are that you don't get to as many as you'd like to. There are just certain ones that if you can sort of anticipate who's going to be there in terms of other writers, other journalists, and the PRs as well. So I suppose that will play a factor too. But I know amongst the team more widely, there is the will to get out there, certainly.
Terrific. Pat, any thoughts on group events?
Yeah, we go to lots of events. We've got quite a big team now, so there's probably somebody at an event at least once a week. But yeah, breakfast, kind of coffee catch-ups are useful, especially when there's a lot to chat through and more to discuss. It's perhaps a more efficient way of getting through things.
Caroline, do you have time with your team of 5 to get out to? I personally am chained to the desk. No, I don't go out, rarely. Although I am going to the BA drinks tonight, which I'm really looking forward to. No, I never leave my desk. If I was going to, it would be for a half-hour lunch meeting. It's so nice going out to places, but realistically, if I'm editing all of the online stories, if I leave the desk, then I'm out for 2 hours to get to an event, do that, get back again. I'm like, we're just going to have a dip in numbers, and it's all very depressing, I know, but it's other people's job to go out and having a good time.
People need to come to you if they want a one-to-one. And Fran, just finish this for us. What kind of events do you enjoy?
I go to some events. I guess those that have lots of people are at them are more useful than those just run by one particular, hotel or PR, I suppose. I've just been to ILTM, for example, in Cannes, which obviously ticks lots and lots of boxes for me. I do also like one-on-one catch-ups over coffee, which is often more practical use of time.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, so just to add to that, IMM, amazing, get like so much done. That is like my dream, 10 minutes per person.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Caroline. And I didn't even pay you to say that. TravMedia may have some news on more events next year, which hopefully will work for our very wonderful panel we've had today. We've enjoyed hearing your picks of the year and hearing how things are changing, what's attracting your attention. So grateful to it. So thank you so much, Caroline Maguire at The Sun, Fran Kellett, Country and Townhouse, lovely having you, Liz Edward, The Times, Pat Riddell, Nat Geo Traveller. To our audience, get your TravMedia Awards entries in by Christmas. Be good to yourself and be good to us rather than leaving it to January. Thank you for tuning in. It's been great doing the webinars this year. Look forward to more next year. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.